Hi everyone, welcome back for my day 2 of my Adex experience and for some tips and tricks on how I did it and was successful. This section for me consisted of the anterior class 3 and posterior class 2 preparation and their restorations, along with the periodontal section. And just as a disclaimer, this is all based on the guidelines as of May 2023. Before you follow this to the T, make sure you look over the candidate guide as there may be some slight changes depending on the time you take it. So let's get started. For this section, you will again check in around 6:30 a.m. Get your assigned restorative typodont with the arches. Make sure to show up early and on time. Go ahead and get comfy, set up your seat or cubicle, but don't mount your typodont yet. CFEs will come around about 1 hour before start time with a picture radiograph and have you diagnose the lesion. You will then write it down on your anterior and posterior progress forms. Don't worry, these lesions was very obvious on the PAs they show you. It's going to be either a max central incisor, ML or DL, or lateral incisor, ML or DL for the anterior class 3, okay? The posterior class 2 is going to either be a mandibular premolar or molar, MO or DO. The teeth that I got for my restorative exam was number 10 ML and number 19 MO. Make sure that you have your candidate guide printed out with notes on it for all the different measurements, because certain measurements are different between the central and lateral maxillary incisors and also from the premolar and molar mandibular posterior preparations. The start time for the anterior and posterior prep with restorations was 8 a.m. and you can take up to 4:15 for both teeth if you want to make it in time to take the periodontic section. Although this sounds like a lot of time do fly. Okay, this is because you may have to ask for modification requests. When I was taking it, every mod request took about 15 minutes to come back, which was actually really good. On the candidate guide, it says it can take up to 30 minutes. I personally did not have a lot of mod requests, but I've heard some students have 5 for a single tooth. Okay, so also you will have to send your typodont for a preparation check for each teeth before you can even move on to restore. Each of these checks for me was about 30 minutes each. Same with the restoration check for each tooth. So for this day, time really flies. What is also extremely important is to read up on the indirect pulp cap and the direct pulp cap requests and directions. Although it is uncommon, I've heard people failing, not recognizing the need for indirect pulp caps, or also not requesting for a direct pulp cap when they have a pulpal exposure. Keep in mind that you can only ask for an indirect pulp cap or direct pulp cap after you have had a mod request approved. This makes sense because you shouldn't have even been close to the pulp if you had only taken the prep to the acceptable range. Some tips that I've heard in regards to indirect and direct pulp cap is as follows, okay? First one, when prepping and you see pink and there still caries or is soft, ask for an indirect pulp cap. If you see pink and you have pulp, request a direct pulp cap. Lastly, if you see pink but there's no caries and it feels hard, then there is no need to request an indirect pulp cap or direct pulp cap. So follow these rules for those and you should be fine. Anyways, at 8 a.m., you can choose if you want to do the anterior class 3 or the posterior class 2 first. I personally started with the posterior class 2, but it really doesn't matter. For the preparation for these two teeth, the main things to look out for is getting the correct measurements, but the major one that fails people immediately is not removing all the caries and sending for a preparation check. The only way to prepare for this, I think, is to practice a lot on the accidental caries teeth and know what the caries look and feel like. Make sure when looking for the caries that the tooth is dry and that you have a sharp explorer for detection. What I found really helpful is that I would dry my tooth very well, and then I can see the white powdery caries, and when I'm feeling it with an explorer, it may feel a little sticky, leathery, a little bit of tuck back. Okay, make sure you practice some more. You really need to get the caries detection down. Now when you are prepping, it's a good idea to place a fender wedge or any sort of metal matrix to protect the adjacent teeth. Keep in mind that these teeth they're super brittle and can fracture. So I honestly would just stay away from using hang instruments at all in its entirety. If you really want to use hang instruments, make sure that they are extremely sharp and you only use it in like a gentle brushing motion. Never start torquing or rotating the instrument. It will for sure fracture the tooth. Make sure you also read up on how to write a mod request, because there is a high chance that you will need one. Here's a good diagram to help you write where on the mod request. The surface that you request has to be specific. Again, all of these can be found in the 2023 Adex Candid Manual. I personally did not need to write one from a Class 2, but I did write one from a Class 3. I saw a small white powdery spot on the axial wall on my Class 3, and I asked for the mod request, but then it was declined, which probably meant that they think it was fine. One big tip is that before you send it in for a mod request, your prep must be at the acceptable limit for that request. If you didn't take it to the acceptable limit and send it in for a mod request, you will lose over 10 points. If you send it in at the acceptable limit, you will only lose 1 point if it's declined. Here is also an example of how I would write it for what you can put here. As you can see, put extend proximal box. For where you put axial wall, and for Y, you can put either caries or decalcification. And for how much, I think a good range to put always is 0.5 millimeters to 1 millimeter. Now that you are satisfied with your prep measurements and is confident and is caries free, then you should send it for a preparation check. When your prep check comes back and the CFE allows you to restore, congrats, that means you passed the prep. If they don't let you restore, sadly, that probably means you failed. Okay, now moving on to restoring. By the way, I'm only talking about composite prep and restoration. I've never done any amalgam prep or restoration ever. So for restoring, a lot of people fail this portion due to not having clear visible contact with the adjacent teeth. This might sound easy, but trust me, it's not. Simply because the accidental teeth arches was so rigid and it barely moves even with the placement of a wedge. So for me, I had a ton of trouble with this. In my experience, when I took it, I placed a metal matrix and a smaller wedge with a garrison ring and restored my Class 2. Because I was trying to do it fast, my wedge didn't go all the way through. I probably only went halfway through. And when I restored it, I saw like this tiniest gap between my Class 2 and the adjacent teeth. I know that this will have failed if I send it in for a restoration check. So to fix it, I had enough time to drill out the entire restoration, which you can do if you have enough time, okay? I redid my setup with the largest wedge that I can fit entirely all the way through. I burnished it really well. And thank God this time I got a really good contact. And I heard that they do check the contact with a flashlight flashing directly through the interproximal to see if there is a visible opening. So be careful, alright? And just as I said before, things may go wrong, but stay calm relax, and fix it. Another example I can give is that the rubber dam placement was giving me a lot of trouble when I was trying to place it. Part of it was because I did not practice putting the rubber dam on before, because I thought, oh, it's gonna be easy, it's just a rubber dam. But in my opinion, now thinking back, you should definitely practice putting these rubber dams, especially the mandible, because the context of these arches are extremely tight and the teeth is very rigid. When I took it, I ripped my rubber dam 3 times when trying to place the dam for my class 2. I was definitely freaking out because I hear people around me already started drilling. I remember still repunching holes on a new rubber dam. But I took a deep breath, told myself to calm down, reminded myself that I have time, and then calmly and more carefully, I was able to make it work, okay? The periodontal section for me was really easy. Don't worry about that at all. They would tell you to scale a certain quadrant, and I think that it was 12 different services that you need to do. And the calculus on it was very easy to come off and very obvious. You can even use an instrument to kind of retract the tissue before you scale it. They give you 90 minutes for this section maximum. Or if you end up using all the time for a restorative section up to 4:15, you will have until 5 p.m. to finish, which means it will leave you about 45 minutes to finish, which I still think is more than enough time, okay? And for some final thoughts on these 2 days, it was definitely very brutal, all right? It was brutal. It was extremely exhausting. Although I find that it does test your hand skills, it is also a test of endurance and also ability to follow instructions. Just be mentally prepared. Make sure you eat a good breakfast that will hold you for the whole day. I will bring a small snack and water, something that you can eat within like 5 minutes in case you need it. Because there is no official break times, you can take a break, but it will be on your own exam time. Try to relax the night before. I wouldn't eat any spicy foods or Taco Bell. Just be smart, alright? Try to get some good rest the night before. But I know that it will be hard because you'll be so nervous and anxious. And having all the different measurements run through your head like a broken record. I know because I barely slept. Just try your best. Lastly, practice makes perfect. There are so many different measurements and criteria, meaning that there are so many ways that you can fail. But practice like you are taking an exam. I will stimulate it like you are really taking it. Grade yourself with the criteria sheet. Have your friends grade it. Have fun with it even. I practiced so many times until I got comfortable. Anyways, that's it. Good luck everyone. Thank you so much for watching and listening. I really hope that this was helpful. Please take care and go kill it.